What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Justis Mosqueda from ACME Packing Company. Talking offensive line here, Justice. How you feeling about the Packers' offensive line these days?
Yeah, we have to bring Big Sexy to talk about the Big Sexies, right?
That was obviously the whole kind of thought process here was driving this conversation, no doubt about it. The whole reason I wanted to talk about the O-line is something that I keep seeing that kind of permeates through Packers Twitter, the Packers blogosphere, as it were, regarding the fact that, yes, the Packers took an offensive lineman in the first round last year, so they don't need to do it again, Justice, and they are so great, quote unquote, at finding these guys on day 3 that there's no reason to invest early draft capital or indeed free agency dollars in the offensive line. And I, for one, completely disagree with that sentiment. Wondering your take on it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because people understand expiring contracts when we talk about receiver, but for some reason not the offensive line, right?
That
Where,
is a good point.
hey, wide
Yes.
receiver, we have to draft a guy this year because these guys are going to become free agents. But offensive line, no, we're good. We got five.
We got
And
five,
they're
right?
all going to stay healthy and they're all going to
Yep.
improve. And yeah, all that. I don't know. I think on a bigger scale, I think it's interesting to talk about this offensive line and like what Matt wants to do, especially in the run game, and kind of how the Packers have found success with later round draft picks and maybe what their limitations were, and if that kind of correlated better with what McCarthy's vision for offense was than LaFleur's a little bit, right? So you
Right.
talk about LaFleur, um,
Especially this last season.
when LaFleur came in, I mean, they were inside zone, outside zone
All the
team
time.
to start.
Yes,
Now
sir.
it's a lot of
That
duo, which
all
is
changed last season.
yeah, it's basically down blocks, and then they run a lot of counter now, and that's all down blocks and then pulls. I think you look at that Eagles game, and we talk about size for receivers, and LaFleur needs a guy
Right.
who's 200 pounds because he's going to impact the run game. The fact that they were able to get away with 300-pound pass protectors really is what it was. With McCarthy getting a guy like a David Bakhtiari, right, who's considered by a lot of people to be a center when he was coming out. He was like 20 years old. A lot of people had considered him to be a center prospect, not a tackle, because he wasn't the best in the run game when he was coming out, right? And he was kind of like an undersized guy, relative to that position. You could look at a J.C. Treader. You could look at a Corey Linsley, right? Like all these interior guys who were really. I mean, Linsley wasn't a tackle, but Treader was a tackle. I mean,
Shredder played tackle in a playoff game.
right?
Yeah, 100%.
They were basically what the Packers looked at, right? Was just hyper athletic guys who played tackle and had position versatility. And in this scheme, I think we're starting to realize, like, if you want to go over the top, you want to beat the teams like Philadelphia, stuff like that. You might have to be physically impulsive.
Yes, right.
And I'm not sure if the team is necessarily there yet. And I think it's really interesting to look at what they want from a measurables perspective, because I think the big thing, and I think they're right about this. I mean, there's proof in the pudding, all that stuff. Like getting those athletic players right on the offensive line almost always helps you in the pass protection game. With that being said, now if you want someone who's going to physically impose on defensive lines and still have that athleticism, we're talking about high draft picks, and that is a very big change of philosophy.
Well, what's interesting to me is the stark kind of change, not just in what they ran. You're talking about counter and things like that, but how committed they were to the idea that they were going to be a run first team with this offensive line, which to me, I thought and I think the metrics kind of bear this out as well. They were very good in pass protection, but very hit and miss when it came to doing the stuff that they were being asked to do. A lot of it was Josh Jacobs making things happen after contact.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like,
I
don't mind the idea of running a power scheme. I've been asking for it forever, but man, they're leaning into it with this line in particular was surprising to me.
I just think it's kind of been LaFleur's DNA. Plus, I mean, Stenovich is a former offensive line coach, and now
Right.
he's running meetings and all that stuff, taking stuff off the plate for LaFleur.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I guess I have 2 points here. One, Bill Barnwell, right, from ESPN, my buddy.
Right. Yep.
I think Nagler's seen me get drinks with him and stuff. I don't have to pretend that we're not friends.
That's fine.
Um, but he tweeted out, right, like people he tweeted out like the EPA stats, and it was like, this free agency class, and it was like Saquon 1, Derrick Henry 2,
Right.
Josh Jacobs 187th or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
But then you look at, any of the advanced stats, and the yards after contact numbers show why Josh Jacobs is so talented. It's just, he was getting hit in the backfield a decent amount
A lot.
because of that offensive
Right.
line. And then also the other thing I would point to, I know I'm speaking out of both ends of my mouth because I just talked about some advanced metrics one way,
Right.
but the protection metrics that say that the Packers are really good, I do wonder, and I don't think there's a great way to measure pressure. And I'm someone who looks at pass rushers a lot. I played center in high school, all sorts of stuff. It's not like I'm foreign to what losing a pass protection block or
Looks
something like
like.
that looks
Right.
like. Right.
Yep. Yep.
I just don't know if there's a standard that you can have across the board, because sometimes, like, if things get muddy around Jordan, that's
Yeah.
a pressure.
Yeah.
That's a pressure. And
feel
maybe
you.
it's not for other people. Right.
And that can be a group statistic, right? Like that's
Mhm.
what always kills me at training camp when people are charting wins and losses in the one-on-ones, right? Like you see a guy make a
With no
move
help, you got a
with
two-way
no help.
go.
Exactly. So I've seen so many people, and now fans are in the stands like doing it as well on their Twitter accounts. And I'm like, somebody tweets, "Oh, well, that guy lost," and it's like, no. The offensive lineman did exactly what he's supposed to do as far as like driving him like past him and past the quarterback. And it's just interesting when you're talking about an offensive line because so much of it is working together, right?
Mhm.
And I do think for the most part, this group did a decent job in both phases of the game. But to me, if the Packers want to, as Brian Gutekunst said, get back to competing for championships, right? Man, they have to improve up front. And that's not to denigrate anybody or their effort, but to me, there are two spots that are set. It's Elton Jenkins and it's Zach Tom. Everything else is wide open in my mind. And I don't know how you feel about that.
I think they're gonna find a spot for Morgan. But yeah, I mean, the big question, right? Well, Josh Myers is gonna be a free agent. I think everyone
Yeah.
kind of assumes Elton's just gonna slide into center.
I don't. See, I think he's sticking at left guard. I really do.
So who's playing center? Ryan?
Probably Jacob Monk or a draft choice. That would be my guess.
Oh, I mean,
See,
Monk was an active, healthy scratch and stuff like that.
I
He
am
was
aware.
undersized too, so
I am aware. I think he
yeah.
really came on at the end of the summer. If you go back and watch the preseason, which I don't,
He was
suggest
good
if
in the
you're a sane
preseason.
person. Yeah, exactly.
I
Like
was surprised that he
he
was
struggled early in the
that
summer,
active.
and I think that kind of put like a stigma on him in fans' minds. But I'm telling you, towards the end of camp and then the preseason, he played pretty damn well. And I know there was opportunities where, especially at the end of that playoff game, he doesn't come in, right? And people have kind of pointed to that, the fact that he's been inactive. But man, we've seen this Packers team, this organization, redshirt dudes before, right? Like, I mean, hell, Josh Nijman was sitting around for 2 years before he got on the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
there's a couple years where they had the tackle redshirt program
right.
for a while.
Right. So I just don't put much stock into it. Like there's every possibility that they're thinking, okay, that's our center next year. Who knows? We'll see. But I do think they'll continue to add probably in the draft. But Elton Jenkins, to me, he's finally kind of solidified himself at guard. And God knows we saw that kind of one instance where he played center against Detroit, and it wasn't pretty. And I know, like, look, as 1 week, one game, a really
wet
good
ball,
opponent,
all that stuff.
wet ball,
he had done it before, but
right.
I mean, it wasn't good. It
wasn't. But he was, again, to your point. You talk about guys in college, like he literally played center his final year in college, right? And who knows, if he gets a full offseason in that spot. Yeah, I do not doubt for a moment Elton Jenkins could shine. I'm not doubting the man, but I just think you've got Elton there at left guard. You've got Zach Tom at right tackle. And I agree with you. I think Jordan Morgan clearly will have a spot. I think there's probably a decent chance that they let him compete at left tackle with Rasheed Walker. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you drafted him.
That's the way that they talked about him on draft day.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, they were like, why He's played left tackle his whole life. Why wouldn't we have him compete at left tackle? I think one of the bigger questions that the Packers have to answer is basically, do you want to double down? And
Right.
that's the question at Walker and Ryan, right? Because their
Yep.
contracts are coming up. It's not just, are we going to keep you guys as starters? It's, are we going to pay Rasheed Walker like a starting left tackle? And that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. For
So
a guy who I think is good, maybe can become great, but he's not great yet. And are you banking on that? You know what I mean?
I mean, I would guess he's probably the ballpark of like 25 to 20th best left tackle in the NFL.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, those guys still command a lot of money just because of the position that they're at.
Absolutely.
And all that stuff. So
I mean, just getting to the market is a win.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
100%.
So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. From a free agency standpoint, there's really only one name that interests me, and it's
Trey I'm Smith. Fascinated because I've only got one too. Which is yours?
Trey Smith,
right,
from Kansas City. I mean, just the way that the Packers salary cap situation is, like, they can add a guy like that if they don't end up adding a splash corner or
right. Don't spend big someplace else, right? Like
pass rusher
or something,
really,
right?
Yeah, like those are really the only. Because I've looked at it. I know you busted my balls about the defensive tackle class last time, but I think those are really
just one player.
Corner and defensive end is probably where I look for a big splash, and then if that's not there, I could see them just saying, like, look, we got to use the money, and Trey Smith is, he's a Pro Bowl caliber guard. Like, let's just go get him. I mean, this money's just going to sit in our pocket if we don't do anything with it. So if we're going to go be aggressive, let's go be aggressive.
I love Trey Smith. I love that idea. My name, the one that I'm looking at, is Kevin Zeitler. I know he's set to be a free agent, and he balled out for Detroit last year. Loved him. I've loved him his entire career. A Wisconsin guy. I'd love to get him in green and gold. To your point, though, I don't know, man. Like, the Packers they haven't made it a habit of spending free agency dollars on offensive lines, offensive linemen, other than like reclamation projects like Andre Dillard last year, right?
Yeah,
like it hasn't been. We're finding starters in free agency normally,
right? For sure. Again, I think this is kind of a unique spot too. And Trey Smith, if you guys aren't aware, like, Trey Smith is probably right after Higgins. He's probably the next biggest free agent, and I think he's probably right up there with Byron Murphy Jr. The corner from Minnesota, as far as like young, talented players coming into a second contract, like
which
guys
Brian
with
likes.
Pro Bowl
That's the kind of guy that he wants to get. Yep, no doubt. Young and on the come up, so to speak.
This draft class, or this free agency class, is not the same as last year's. It's not nearly as deep, especially as far as young players, which is what I think Green Bay will try to address. I think the big thing is probably the most realistic thing, right? If you ask me to put odds on it, I don't think that the Packers are going to sign Trey Smith. I'm sure that they would like to have him at a certain price point. I'm sure other teams will drive up the number.
Of course.
The big thing is just, like, I don't think it's off the table at any draft pick.
Totally agree. 23 is in play, in my mind.
Yeah, for 100%. Sure. And it's a good tackle class from everything that I've seen. I know, one of my buddies who's scouting in the league just kept sending me clips today about the tackle from Missouri. And he's like, this kid's super talented, man. Like, he kind of fits the Packers MO and all that stuff. I hadn't seen the Missouri kid. But I'd seen, guys like Josh Simmons.
I was just going to say DJ had him in his mock today to Green Bay.
If we take an injured,
I was just going to say,
first round, people are going to go nuts, dude.
Coming up a knee injury, position versatility, Packer.
Yep. That's the other thing about this draft class that I don't know if people are ready for.
Right,
man. A lot of first rounders are banged up.
A
lot, especially at the Packers positions of need. Like, we have any? I don't even know if people have caught up on the
offensive line. Yeah, 100%.
The Mason Graham thing. I don't know if people have caught up to that. Like, I know, I have a buddy at Oregon who was like, Mason Graham. Like, we knew he could barely practice. Like, he was basically just suiting up for games last year, because he was fighting through injuries and stuff like that. And he's going to be a top 10 pick. Will Johnson.
Is this the official whisper campaign to drive him down to 23? I'm in.
Let's do it. Him and Shamar Stewart. Yeah, let's get them both.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Yeah. Again, I just think adding competition is probably the way to go about it. The Packers do a pretty good job of that. Just historically, like, they have one hole in the offensive line. They usually hit it twice because they know how important that is, especially, you're going to probably drop one of the five guys at some point during the season.
Right.
Having Morgan come off the bench is certainly going to probably help you going into this year where you're just like, oh, yep, basically get it like a
Need
free
'em.
first round pick.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right.
I just don't know what you do with the contract situation. That is something that do I want Ryan? Like, Ryan's fine.
But you can do
Am I
better.
going to give
That's my
him?
thing, man. I love Sean Ryan, and maybe you talk about who's going to play center. Maybe he plays center. That's
Yeah, he
entirely
could,
possible.
but I don't know if
He
I
was
want to
the
give him the
backup last year coming out of camp,
John
right?
Runyon Jr. contract. I don't know if I
Nope,
want to give him $30 million. And
I
then
don't.
Rasheed Walker, I'm like, do I, would I
You want to give him
want
left
to?
tackle money?
Would I want to run it back with Rasheed Walker as we try to find our best five and put together a really good best five?
Mm,
Love to do that. The problem is Rasheed Walker's going to get paid left tackle money soon, so you
yep.
don't really have the privilege, I guess is the way to say it,
Especially
to
after
kind of run that back.
you're literally about to pay Zach Tom as well,
Yeah,
right? Like that's
yeah.
coming up here in the next couple months. Like
And
so,
I'm not so worried from like a cap perspective with the Tom thing because I think the Tom thing is going to work out and there's money to be found, right? Like if they move off of Jair, which by all accounts seems like they're going to move
most
off of
likely going to
Jair, that's
happen,
going to save them
right?
a lot of money in 2026. Plus, we can, depending on how this year goes, we can start having conversations about Gary and Clark, and that could potentially free up a lot of money
Well,
too.
I'm pretty sure this is Kenny's last year in Green Bay, so there goes that. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
So I'm not too worried about bringing Tom back. It's just more about like tying up all that money into Walker, and then
Well,
Ryan.
that's
I
the
just
thing,
don't know
right?
what Ryan is going to get.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you talked about the Runyon deal. I mean, if you're any Packers offensive lineman and you're heading into a final season of your deal, how do you not want to see what's behind that door, right? I think a lot of people were probably surprised
John
when
Runyon got $30 million.
you know what I mean? Like when Runyon's out there
Yeah.
getting 10 per the first day of free agency,
Yeah.
like they didn't.
Yes.
I mean, he was
And he was
gone. He was off the market like that.
They were rotating him in and out.
Yeah,
They were
that's
rotating
what
him
I
in and
mean.
out of
Like
the lineup with Sean
so, if
Ryan.
you're
Yeah.
Rasheed Walker, how do you not want to get to the market? And if you're
Yeah.
the Packers, I think you're probably okay with that. You know what I mean? Trying to improve, trying to keep adding talent
Yeah.
at that position. You're talking Simmons or whoever, but I just think, or Morgan, who you just drafted. You know, I just think it's twofold too because they love versatility and like it's so funny because I keep joking about Gray Zabel, but like that wouldn't surprise me either. Like pulling that trigger at 23. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And that's a guy, another versatile guy who had a good Senior Bowl, etc. But I think that's way more likely than some big free agent splash. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I think that is just like, again, there's one, and teams will trip over themselves to get offensive linemen.
Big time.
Again, Runyon signed for $30 million a year. DJ Humphries is a guy I would probably look at for comparison for where Rasheed Walker ranks among left tackles at the time of potential extension, right?
Right.
Humphreys was, probably below average left tackle, but not a bad left tackle by any means. He was always going to get a big contract somewhere. He ended up signing a 3-year, $66.6 million contract with the Cardinals in 2022. So, yeah, man. I mean, we're talking about $20 million if we want to double down on Rasheed Walker. Like, that's just what it is for a
It's the
proven
market.
starter left tackle in the NFL level, man.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I think they'll keep drafting them, and I don't mind them
Mm-hmm.
drafting them early. That's the whole kind of impetus here. Because again, just to kind of put a bow on this, right? The idea that they've found all these guys on day 3, because that's what I keep hearing, right? Well, let's go through day 3 under Brian Gutekunst, shall we? Like here is the list, starting with Zach Tom, who is no doubt a hit, no question about it. But then you've got Royce Newman, Cole Madison, Jacob Monk, Travis Glover, Jake Hansen, John Runyon, who just got paid, Simon Stepaniak, whose name I can't pronounce, Cole Van Lanen, and the aforementioned Rasheed Walker. So you've got Tom, you've got Walker, and I guess Runyon you could consider a hit because he did start for you and went
Mhm.
on and signed another deal, etc. But after that, buddy, I want to be great. I want to compete for championships, and you ain't doing that with Cole Madison. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Packers have kind of done some interesting stuff at the back end of the roster. Like they've been pretty active in terms of like the waiver wire at cut downs. They've been
Truly.
active on plucking guys off of practice squads, just trying to like figure out that depth. And they've really attacked the tackle position too, especially with like bigger guys. Like it seems like when it seems like they want to get bigger, and they're willing to put the investment in guys like Caleb Jones or stuff like that, right?
Right.
But
And
the
let it play
problem
out and
is,
hope and see if they develop kind of thing.
right,
Like, I mean,
you
that's
know,
what they did with Yash, right?
right, exactly. But the problem is, as far as proven talent goes, to find guys who are that size can also contribute, significantly in the run game and still have the pass protection stuff that you want. Like you're talking about, like trading up for Mims or whoever. I would just
Mm,
think of him out of Georgia, right?
right. Last year.
Trading up
Right.
for a guy like that in the first round to address that, rather than letting it fall to you
Fall
and
to
just
you.
saying like, hey,
Right.
we're going to take the pass protector and we know we're going to play. We're going to be a zone run team and all this stuff, and we're going to be a little light um, in our pants. We're not going to have as much sand in our pants
Well, that's what's
as
wild
everyone
to
else.
me. You see, you say that, and I'm like, what's wild to me is they talked about I'm talking about. I have spoken to people both in personnel and on the coaching staff who are like, oh, we just consider ourselves a much better power run team this year. Because I asked, like point blank, like where did all the zone stuff go? And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm looking at this roster and I'm looking at this line thinking, there's still a zone line. Like, why? How you can't just wave a wand and say now we're a power team with the same personnel. But that's what they seem to do. I don't know. And I understand, like, you're right. LaFleur clearly wanted to lean into it.
Hmm.
But I don't know, man. It's just that was a bit baffling to me. I
Yeah.
was a bit kind of taken back by that.
I do wonder, like, if they're not going to be as pass heavy anymore, right? And they're
Right.
not going to have as many answers in the run game on the perimeter, where Rogers is just taking the snap, flicking it out to
Yeah.
Devontae Adams, right?
Right.
Um, if Love is going to get pressured because of what pressure means to him relative to Rogers,
Mm.
then at one point do you just say, like, we're going to get a little bit bigger on the offensive
You need
line,
to build a wall.
because
Right.
that's just kind of going to help everything. If we want to establish the run, we're not getting out of the runs. We're going to need some more pushback from the
Oh,
offensive
that's
line.
good too. That's a really good point. The idea that you're not doing as much at the line of scrimmage with your quarterback possibly checking,
Well, I
right?
mean, even like the way that they talk about Ryan or Josh Myers, I don't know why I called him Ryan.
Man.
Josh Myers, like a lot of the things that they say is like great about him isn't even like what he's doing on film, right? It's
Yeah.
like he's a great leader in the locker room. Everyone loves the guy. He does so much for us in like protections and at the line of scrimmage, which I don't think that's a huge knock for Love. I know people are like, he
Mm.
signed the huge extension and stuff like that. But
People
I
just
mean,
love to
he's
bitch, man. You know that.
year two going into the NFL as a starter. Until the bullets are live, the bullets aren't live, right? So
Yep.
I understand why. Especially, I mean, look back at what was it, the end of half? Was it Seahawks or Bears? I can't remember, where they messed up like the 2 minute warning or the 2 minute drill
Oh,
because Love
you could choose a lot of
was
games.
checking,
Yeah. It
and
was
all
the end of
sorts
the
of stuff.
Bears, the end of the first half against the
End of the
Bears.
first Bears game. That's what
Yep.
it was.
Yep.
So yeah, like I could understand why that would matter and why you wouldn't necessarily want to give Love, the full smorgasbord of options
Stuff at the line
at
of
the line of
scrimmage.
scrimmage every single
Right.
time. So
Yeah.
I think all this stuff is just kind of like tied in together. It's a young team competition, man. That's really
Lots
what
of
it
it.
boils down to.
Very much agreed. And you got to think, well, we're going to see a lot of it coming out of the draft and coming into this
Mhm.
offseason. No question about it. Justice, really appreciate the time as always. And I'll talk to you next week from the combine, man.
Yes, sir.